Rebecca, hello. Why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
I'm Rebekah Cresswell. I'm CEO of Priory, but I started my career as a nurse and a health visitor actually in inner city Liverpool, inner city Manchester. So I had a good grounding in my clinical practice, and I worked in the NHS for 14 years before coming to Priory. I've done about four different jobs at Priory. I started as sort of director of quality for the hospital side of the business, which and then moved to different roles. But I really loved being the chief operating officer for Priory Adult Care, which is our care homes division. I did that for 3.5 years. We had 240 care homes at that time, and I think it really helped me, all that work within social care, to be able to do the job that I'm doing now.
That's fabulous. Okay, great. Now, so Rebecca, where do we start? How social care can help autistic people thrive? So, tell me your kind of your first point of entry into this subject.
I have a son, Adam, who is autistic and also got ADHD. And I guess him growing up, I saw how much he was misunderstood in school, etc., and different environments. And then I was privileged enough to work in social care, which Priory has 200 care homes which support people with learning disability and autism. And one of my big missions as I got, and also working in hospitals before that, I could see autistic people being trapped in hospital because they might have a mental health issue. They go in, but because it's so noisy in a hospital, you kind of have to fit in with what everybody else is doing. Whereas somebody with autism, you really need to be so specific to them in the care that you provide. And obviously, what happens is you get people having incidents, then they have to stay in hospital longer, and it's a catch-22. So, one of my big missions was to get as many people out of long-term hospital care into a social care home, and had some brilliant stories at Priory of how we've done that. But it's not been without its learnings, and I don't know whether you want me to tell you a little bit about
Um,
that first of all.
would love to, yes.
So I understood this problem and the national agenda to get people in long term, and
Hmm.
it's frightening. Some people have been in hospital 40 years. That you can't imagine that in this country, and they once they come into a care home and have the support that they require, they just thrive. And I've got so many excellent stories. But I remember one young man who was 19 that we supported with a placement. He had 17 failed placements by the time he was 19 years old. And nobody would support him in social care. And I really wanted to give him a chance. And for the sake of this podcast, we'll call him Jay. And he came into one of our care homes a number of years ago, and there were lots of incidents, as there can be when somebody's transitioning somewhere new. And the workforce at that particular home said, he either leaves Rebecca or we do. And I said, well, he's
Yeah.
not leaving because he's had enough rejection in his life. So we're going to work hard to support him. And I'm quite a leader, Adam, who will go there and be with the people myself rather than just manage from afar. So my
Okay.
managing director and I did that. And we managed to look after Jay for about 15 months before we couldn't anymore. But he taught me a great deal about the need to be prepared in our care homes to look after somebody who's very complex. And from that placement, I developed the idea of having an assessment and transition director for complex autism that would help care homes do the assessment in the first place, prepare the environment, train any colleagues in any areas that they needed to. And they managed like a caseload almost. And as soon as, and for about 6 weeks, and then they will withdraw from that. But we've had our sort of failed placements have gone down to, like, you can count them on one hand because that preparation time and making sure everything's bespoke. And that's been very successful since. So I think care homes have to be very prepared to do this kind of work. It's not something you can just step into, and that's the right thing to do as a provider. But there's many wonderful stories from once people are able to thrive in their environment and they're not overstimulated all the time, they start to be able to form relationships and do some of the things that they've always wanted to do. Now, we looked after one young man who, was in his room all the time. He now cycles out on his bike, and with autistic people, and even with my own son, if you can understand the things that are really important to them, they thrive, as you say, to do the things that they want to do. The
Mm.
second thing that's really important that social care do, because it's not a medical model, they will do positive behaviour support. And what happens to autistic people in hospital is that often, because it's a medical environment, hospitals will try and treat behaviour with medication when what they need is positive behaviour support and
Mm.
that sort of. And one of the things we really work hard on is taking people off. They can be on more than 10 psychotropic medications as they layer them on to zero, and to watch that person come alive again because they're not heavily medicated, and you have to do it slowly over time. But that's a very important work that social care do.
Can ask you, Rebecca, so like in 2024, is this a scenario you're still coming across with the demedication of people?
Sorry, say that.
Is
Repeat that
is that
question.
still, yeah, sorry, Rebecca. Is in 2024, is that still something, because that, I mean, you're much closer to this than I am, of course, right now, but I remember 15 years ago, this was a big thing, the demedicalization, moving people into, supportive environments outside the hospital. But to hear, and I'm just curious to know to what extent this on just purely on the decrease, if you like, of reliance on heavy duty medication, to what
Yeah.
extent is that something that's still like very prevalent in 2024 or not, or how's that maybe changed
Still
over
is
the years?
there because we have
Mm.
a national program called STOMP. I can't remember. I think it stands for Stop the Over Medication of
Mm.
People with a Learning Disability and Autism. And that's basically what it
Right.
means.
Yeah.
And it's still something that we pursue with every placement. I know my other care home providers, colleagues, will be doing the same. And it can be really, I mean, I remember being told once by a psychiatrist who said, this person is on this many medications, you'll never get them off.
Right.
And it did take a year, but they did.
Mm.
And I love going back to the psychiatrists and saying they've just had fish and chips on the beach,
Mm.
which
Mm.
is somewhere that they thought they couldn't be before. And that is what that person's wish was, to go and have fish and chips on the beach. I
Mm.
mean, Adam, we're not talking about huge things, those things that make your life pleasurable, my life pleasurable, of those things that really matter to us. And I think that's what social care achieves for people, because they look beyond the barriers and try to work with.
Yeah, I see. And this transition, as you mentioned, is obviously so important, and you've highlighted. And I guess that has been a learning experience for the whole sector generally, about how best to do that and the importance of doing it. And tell me a little bit more in terms of you've given some lovely anecdotes and kind of what you've learned, because as you all know, that this kind of spectrum, so to speak, of autism is very varied. But tell me what more you've learned about that in making sure you do your utmost to get it right.
I think you have to work in a multidisciplinary way, and most social care providers will access the community mental health teams and or the general practitioners, etc. And it's important to work together as a team. But in social care, and this
Mm.
is the point I wanted to make,
Mm.
I'm a big advocate for care as a career, because people in social care have so many wonderful attributes and values that you don't get in other sectors, and the art of the possible and what can be done. And I think you have to have courage, because it's sometimes hard when you're presented with maybe a group of a certain profession to go, no, I think this is, stand up and be the advocate for the autistic person or the person with a learning disability.
Mm.
So you need to be brave, but I want everybody to think about the excellent body of knowledge that they possess that maybe somebody in the healthcare system doesn't. I mean, everybody is doing the Oliver McGowan training now. I'm sure you've heard of that, Adam, and people. And to hear Oliver's mum's story about trying to get through to professionals about what was right for her son. And, I've not experienced it that effect, but I've had it in the education system with my own son. So I think in social care, we're we've got a real privilege to be that voice for that person,
Mm,
and to
mm.
really have a faith in ourselves, I guess, that we do have a body of knowledge that others don't have, and we can speak up and say, but how can we get this person off this medication, even if it's slowly? So
Yeah.
work as a team would be and with the professionals, but also have the courage.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit if you can of on the your care teams and kind of you need to be of a certain character and attributes and have certain skills. I have no doubt in terms of supporting and helping people thrive. So when you are kind of recruiting and doing your training, and what kind of attributes are you looking for in with your colleagues?
Well, we have something in Priory Adult Care called the Positive Culture Pledge. After the whole Winterbourne View and also the other stories that we've heard that are about cultures that are not acceptable, I thought, how can we express, rather than say, don't do this, don't do that, what is a positive culture? What does it look like? So when we talk about Positive Culture Pledge, we talk about you're chosen. This is it's not just some job you've gone for, you've been selected to do this
Mm,
important special work. It talks about patience, because sometimes you might have to go over a small thing many, many times for it to make a lasting change. It's about giving people dignity, respect. I'm trying to remember all the
sure.
points around, but we've written it down, and then we have
Mm,
this strap line that if it's not good enough for my family member, it's not good enough for anybody that we support. So um, kind of getting people thinking in that way. And now everybody will talk about positive culture pledge and how they're demonstrating it and working as a team to make sure those things. And the other thing, Adam, which is really important that I'm sure my colleagues do, is if we do get somebody who doesn't have those good values, we don't just, I mean, we follow every proper HR process, but
mm,
we proactively drive them out of the business.
right.
It's not something that's left to, go on
Well,
for a long
yeah.
time. People know that if you don't live by the values, you're not going to work here.
Yeah, yeah, I see. That's very interesting to hear. And I was also intrigued by something you mentioned at the top of this episode about, you visiting and being, hands-on where you can. I was thinking with 280 facilities, it's quite a lot. So I just wondered how you personally organize your year in terms of prioritizing visits and what you do when you visit and that kind of thing.
Well, when I visit, I make sure I try and do a visit every month, because sometimes some of the other stuff you have to do as a chief exec can really drag you down, and it's really important to keep touching base with the thing that really inspired you in the first place. So
Mm,
I get so much out of the visits that I do, and I visit our hospitals, our wellbeing centres, our care homes, supported living services, and I make sure that I go around and talk to as many people as I can. I don't go and sit in the manager's office. They know me that I want to go and talk. I will talk to the residents that we support in their lounge with them, have a cup of tea.
mm,
I did that just recently, a couple of weeks ago, and they always say, "Thank you so much for coming to visit," but I don't know what they give so much more to me. I always go out of there with such a thrill of seeing how people are thriving. I went to one of our homes recently where a lady introduced me to her boyfriend. She had made me a lovely picture that I've got up in my hallway now. And she had such joy and thriving of life in what she was doing, and it made me really proud of what the team was achieving.
that's fabulous. And also, a question I have for you, Rebecca, is just around families and how you how you work or support with families. It's families will be under their own difficulties and the issues of, having a son or daughter, for example, with a learning disability that might be being, complex and difficult, and then the issues of them, being under care. How do you tell me about working with families, how you do it, and the pros and things that goes well and things that are more challenging. Tell me about that.
I think it's really important to understand that when you are working with a family, they've probably had so much history of just
Mm,
being able to get their loved one support that they need.
right.
They've had sleepless nights, they've
Yeah.
had things breaking down, they've had and sometimes people can feel very defensive when you're working with them, but it's because they've had such a traumatic experience before. And I think if you understand that, you can see past that, and it's just they're putting a lot of trust in social care providers, giving their most precious person over to you. So, I always talk about loved ones rather than families or mother, because it humanizes everything. We're
Mm,
privileged to look after somebody's loved one. And we need to do that right. And one of the best compliments I've seen is when a mother will write to you or a family member and say, I'm finally sleeping again at night time
mm,
because I
mm.
know that my loved one is safe and that they're being well supported. I mean, there's no greater compliment than that because so I think it's understanding that families have been through quite a tough time before they might end up in your care home,
Yes.
and understanding rather than seeing them as challenging sometimes, or they just want the best for the person, and it is our job to demonstrate that we're going to do that.
Yeah, yeah, fabulous. And I know, of course, particularly around autism, we was talking about the various degrees of particular behaviors that various people may have. And it's all very, in people, are, of course, always individuals. But curious to know to what extent, some work opportunities and collaboration with community groups and where that comes into play in enabling people to kind of thrive. Where does that fit into the equation, and how do you think about it? How do you go about it? How do you do those small steps? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, there's many things. It depends, as you say, on the complexity of the individual. Some people
Mm,
will be able. There's many people that we support who might have a job within a cafe or a shop or do volunteer work, and
mm,
we support people however we can if that's what they're able to do. And
mm,
then you have some people who are very, very complex. I think of one gentleman in the Northwest that we supported that used to bang his head so much with frustration, you could actually see right to his skull, and they thought that
mm,
would never heal. And it is healed now. It took
yeah.
many years of working with,
Mm,
but that was his frustration. And
mm,
then he got to the point where he was able to say what he'd really like to do, and it was go swimming because he remembered as a boy, this gentleman's in his 40s now,
right.
went swimming with his dad. And he said, I
Yeah.
really want to go swimming. He would never be able to go into a public swimming pool. So
Mm,
we're able to source a private house with swimming pool who was willing to rent it to us for his
oh,
sessions. And with his permission, we did his story. I don't think they've been, but I've got some photos of just him just languishing and being in that
mm,
water.
mm.
And he'll now say, "Can we go to the posh house again?" Because but it's tapping into.
Yeah.
You can't automatically get to what people want until you deal. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of need. We need that sort of food, warmth, nutrition, and stuff met and feeling safe before you can get to the next level. I think that's what
Mm,
social care do. Once people
mm.
start to feel safe, he's healed physically. He could then start to express what was important, and just seeing the joy on his face. Because we start every adult care operating board with a resident story, and his
Oh, I
came
see.
to the board, and I was just so pleased that I'd met him before to see that he had that experience.
Yeah, that's great. So, obviously, Rebecca, you're very passionate about this, and that comes through in everything you say. And I'm curious to know, from your perspective, let's say over the last 10 years, how the social care sector generally has been able to increasingly support people with learning disabilities and autistic people, where it's and there's always the pressure of funding, etc. Where are you on this? Or like, yeah, where it's all going just great, high on optimism, or where are the challenges? Where do you see the let's say the progress and failures over the last 10 years?
Well, I think the whole sector is really challenged at the moment, but that gives us the opportunity to be innovative and work in new ways. And that is a bit of a cliche when people say that, I know, but kind of hard times help you to galvanize and think, what are we doing here? So, I mean, Priory, for example, since I had this passion of getting people out of hospital, have moved about 90 people out of long-term hospital placements into community
Mm,
and done really well. The people that are left in hospital are the hardest and most complex, and the people that will need more thinking. We need our regulators also to think differently about placements as well, and because I guess regulation and frameworks are for the majority. It's like a standard deviation curve. The
mm,
majority will fit into this framework, but we're now trying to support the people that are probably at the extreme ends of things. So we need flexibility with our regulators. We need excellent training. I am very optimistic. One of the things that Priory does is, and it's mainly because the people that are in hospital are detained under the Mental Health Act, is
mm,
we create bespoke therapeutic placements within our hospitals so people who are autistic do not have to be on a main ward, and they have their own like flat, but they still are covered under with all the doctors and nurses, etc., that they might need. And we found that the length of stay is gone from 5 years down to about 18 months
wow,
because
that's
they're not
great.
overstimulated with all that extra noise and they're engaging with people in their own
Yeah.
terms that they can get better quicker. So I think although it feels really hard at the moment, it's about inspiring people to want to work in this really exciting sort of sector and to build their career here. So we need exciting career opportunities. We need to think outside the box, and we need to constantly be upping our game. I don't think social care is like it was. I remember being a nurse on general medical ward, and a lot of older people's homes certainly are. I was look after people who would have been on a general medical ward back then, and it's the same with learning disability and autism. So it's the time for social care to really step into this space, I think.
Wonderful, great. Well, that's fabulous. Rebecca, is there anything that we've not covered up to now that you feel that you should mention?
I don't think so. Just everybody keep going and doing the brilliant work you're doing. So thank you for having me, Adam. I really appreciate that.
That sounds a great message to end on. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the Care CEO Success Stories podcast.
Thank you.